So this is a talk on SVG, everything you should know about it. And let's get started. All right, so disclaimer, I'm not really an expert on everything that I'm be talking about, so I could be wrong at any point in time. Feel free to correct me if I am. But SVGs, I'm going to be covering some of the fundamentals of what it is, how it works, why you should care about it, and what can it be used in your day-to-day application work. So really, when we talk about design, right, because SVG is a design graphic, we have to first talk about like the web in general, like what it's used for, like why we should really be doing the things that we're doing. The web solves a lot of different problems in the industry, or just in industries in general. We have different tools for connecting people on social networks. We have different tools for connecting people together on business applications. We have software that solves actual problems, right? And the thing with solving these types of applications, right, is really there are a couple of different facets to it. One is UX design animations. So if you have a great user experience to a potential client or to potential users of the user base, they'll enjoy using that platform more often, right? So because there's so many different facets in that, you really have to have a mastery in that field set to really become a user, someone who's really good at building UI interfaces for great user experiences. So sorry, this was adapted from another talk that I had, and I just took out parts of it, so correct me, I actually left that part on there. I could actually do that talk too instead. It's probably more interesting. But there are a couple different facets of mastering like that front-end UI interface technology. Not just with just like learning React, learning, Vue or Angular or whatever, but really it boils down to a bunch of other different frameworks that are agnostic across all frameworks, and one of them is SVGs. So, and that really opens up opportunities for more meaningful projects that have greater impacts by having that knowledge set. So SVGs, what is SVGs? Does anyone know what SVGs are?
Scalable vector graphics. Yeah.
All right. So can you describe in your own words, like what is scalable vector graphics to you?
So rather than say having Photoshop, a raster-based image, which is an image built out of pixels, SVGs are actually built out of math. So
Exactly.
you can scale these up as infinitely as you want, or down as infinitely as you want, and it'll still look sharp on the edges. There won't be any blurring. It's perfectly scalable. So you can put it on any device. It'll look great.
Man, you should have just done this talk. That's like the perfect answer. Like last time I asked them, like no one's like, I don't even know what SVG even stands for. Like, but yeah, let's going back to like the history of SVGs. It is an actual image format. For like you said, you have that raster image, you have that crisp image. It is a two-dimensional graphic that was used or created back in the day from the Worldwide Consortium in 1999. And it really didn't pick up popularity till like 2011 when like the Rails era kind of boomed up. But scalable vector graphics, just the name of itself, it's scalable in the sense that you can have a really small image and it'll look perfectly fine, or you can have like a super large image and it'll look perfectly fine. Because everything, like you said, is mathematically based, whereas like a raster image is like a bunch of like little dots in space. Vector in that when you're drawing and actually telling like the browser like what's rendered on the page, it is telling it via like this is a point here and this is a point here, there's the line connecting them, right? Whereas like a regular image is like dot 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 dot, right? Graphics in the sense that it's a graphic file, right? You do it in Illustrator, you can do it in Photoshop, you can put it on the web. There's a lot of different formats for it, or a lot of different use cases for it. And like you said, there is that whole trend when you're comparing bitmap images versus SVGs. And a bitmap is just like you have that 2x2 matrix, right? And you have like that grid line. You're like actually plotting points in space. That is the core difference between that. This doesn't scale really well when you're taking like a really small image format. Like let's say you're doing like a 16-bit image and you're blowing it to like a 4K screen. It's gonna look crap. But this because it's all mathematically related, it looks nice. And they are native markup. Well, SVGs are native markup documents when inside of native web code. So to show you in actual examples, okay, so just going forward, so with SVGs, you can use it in multiple different ways. You can use it in Sketch, you can use it in Illustrator, you can display it in image browsers and web browsers, and it's an open graphic that can use anywhere. So to give you an example, I'm gonna actually put this in Figma, right? Figma is a UX tool that you can use for essentially designing mock-ups and layouts for your applications. Are you guys familiar with that tool? Have you guys heard of Figma? Have you guys heard of Sketch?
Yeah.
It's like Sketch, but it's online. Or if you guys use Photoshop, it's like Photoshop without all of with just the core tools for web UI design layouts. So I've already designed this, and I just drew it out. I just drew it out using the different tools available to me with this program. I just drew it over to the side. But if you want to see actually how it actually works, I can draw like a box here. I can draw. It's been a while since I've written this down, but I can draw different lines. I can draw different things, right? And I already drew this single example to kind of illustrate the point. It is the command bar icon from the Mac. So if you take this image, right, and there are a couple of different ways when you're actually working in a production environment. A lot of times a designer will send you here's all of these assets that we have, right? They'll have logos, they'll have different icons that you can put on the web page, and then they'll have it all laid out for you. In this case, this is a contrived example because I just have one image, but they'll send you that file, and then you can upload it to Figma. You can reference it in Sketch. You can reference it wherever you want. In this case, I'm referencing Figma. What you do in this case, if you want to bring that SVG over to your project, is you just copy it. There is a tool at the bottom called Export Frame, and you can export it as an image, SVG, JPEG, whatever. So if you were to export this, actually there is a faster way. You can literally just copy this, right click, and then go to copy as SVG. This is a really common workflow if you're working with any designers, and I do this all the time. And I want to show you what it actually looks like when you take this code and you bring it over to an actual index.html page. So right here, right now, I have just a very contrived, simple example in that I have an index.html file, I have a simple image.jpg, right? And that's referencing that local file. So this is all just metadata associated with just standard HTML document. And then this is the image I'm referencing currently that's living locally in the folder. So what you could do with SVGs, you can treat them a couple different ways. In this instance, I'm going to call it image sample 2, let's say. And I'm going to give it a SVG class, right? And I copied all that code that I had on that artwork, and I can just paste it. And this is a really common workflow. If there's anything you're gonna get out of this whole talk, you should know this, because you're gonna be using it all the time. If you ever work with a designer, it is the most useful thing to know.
So to be clear, you just copied an image from Figma.
Yeah. So literally,
code directly.
So literally, I literally just highlighted it, right-clicked, and then I went to copy as SVG. There is also a similar tool for Sketch. It's the exact same workflow. There's a right-click context menu, and you can just copy it just like that. And it took me a while to find that out, actually. But once you find out, it's super powerful. You don't have to use the export tool at the very bottom. But if you copy it, right, and this is this whole SVG file, you can treat it like an image. So I have that image sample.2. I'm sorry, let me go to the actual hello world example. I can simply just take this image out and just reference that actual SVG, and it'll actually pop up, right? So SVGs you can treat SVGs as actual images. And if you have a style.css file, which I don't have here because I forgot to put it, I'll just put it inline. You can take that image and you can just say max width 200 px, right? And you can scale it down. So SVGs, when they're loaded as an image by default, they occupy the entire, they occupy sometimes a lot more space than it needs to be, so you can always style those images thereafter. So that's one way of using an SVG, right? Another way you can use an SVG, and this is probably the most common way, is actually using it as an image because you can scale it up and down. Another way you can actually use SVGs is you can take that code right here, and you can just copy that thing. Let's just comment this out right here. You guys can read that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you can paste the entire thing. And that also works too. So you can reference it as an image, you can reference it inline is what we call it, and then there's also a third way of referencing it, which this is a lesser known way, but it's good to know as well. It's when you're using it as a background image. So what you can do is SVG, sorry I didn't bring this up earlier, it's an SVG embed encoder. So you can actually take your SVG code and you can paste it in this tool. And what it does is it creates a CSS background for you. I don't know if you guys can read that. It's kind of hard, but so I literally took that SVG code right here and I just pasted it right here. It's kind of hard to tell, but it's all right there. And then it creates this ready background image that actually can be used in your application too. So going back to the original example, and I'm just trying to hit off all the major ways you can actually use SVGs on a website. So taking that same example, I am just going to straight up delete it, and I'm going to make a div, and I'll call it class is equal to SVG background or something like that. Right, and close it off, and I'm going to put that inline style, and I'm just going to dump this whole thing in there. All right, and it didn't work. Wonder why? It's probably because I don't have a width. I think I have to give it a width. Oh, there it is. You can see it. It's not exactly what I wanted, but you get the point across. If I blew it up by 1,000. Oh, there you go. Whoops, that's sometimes it's not exactly what you want when you're actually using it as a background image. You can kind of see right now what the application is for using it as an actual background image. If you're repeating a background tile set, like if you have like this really cool like small like scalable vector graphic and it's like this little tiny thing, and you want to repeat it like 100 times over, you can do it that way. So those are the three ways you'll use SVGs. Either as an image, right? Either as an image, either as a actual inline SVG, or as a background.
So what are the advantages between the different methods you use? So images are limited because you can't really touch the SVG, but you bring in the SVG code, what advantages do you get? Yeah.
So sometimes, so that's a good point. I was actually going to show that in the next talk, or the next part of the slides. Referencing as an actual image itself is very convenient because you just export it and copy paste right away, and you can always scale it up and down however you need to and not have to worry about graphics or worry about resolution level. When you're putting it in line, because everything is in line, let me just go back a couple steps. When you're putting it in line like this, actually, I wanted to hit on this point real quick. When you're putting it in line, the reason why you put this in line is these are all XML type format documents, and that it's also describing the image, but they're also HTML elements. So like, this is equivalent, like the same thing as like a div, or this is like a paragraph. They're all the same really. You can style them however you want. So in this example, like I can select the SVG, right? And I could say background color green, right? And that doesn't do anything. Maybe it's color green. Maybe I'll just do it's actually fill. Sorry, it's fill. There you go. I just keep forgetting. But if you want to style individual parts of the SVG, you can always you can actually use CSS, and then you can also alternatively use JavaScript as well. So the main benefit of putting it in line, even though it looks like really ugly, is that you can modify every single line of code. You can do fill. There's also, they have them all right here actually. You can kind of like read it. I don't know if you can see that right here. There's like a stroke, so I can put like a stroke color, and I could say like red, and that didn't do anything. Well, that's okay. So sorry, it is on the path element. It's on the rectangle element, so I can do like rectangle stroke red, and that should do something. Okay, so you can change individual parts, and then this is where the power of SVGs really comes in play. So you can use it for animations. Let me go to the slides again to kind of go through to see where I'm at right now. So with SVGs, there are two different types. Well, actually, two different groups to explain it more properly. You have SVGs that you can hand code, right? These are things like, hey, I want to get a rectangle right here, right? And this rectangle, you literally just define the rectangle. You define the SVG wrapper elements, and then the rectangle, and then the closing tag. Likewise, if you're doing a circle, all you have to do is you have to find the center points, the CX. I don't know if you guys can read that. You guys can read that, right? How do you zoom in? I guess I can't zoom in. Oh, okay. So you can define like the center of where the circle starts, or where the origin's at, like the CX/CY. You can define the radius, and you can define like the stroke as well, right? Likewise, if you're doing like a polygon, if you're doing a line, there's just a certain number of parameters that are kind of predictable and that are easy to modify and like type in, right? But if you go back to that previous example, though, you can see it's like, gobbledygook, right? Like, what is this crap, right? It doesn't look human readable, right? And I'll actually explain why in a bit. And this is where I kind of wanted to hit on, like, there are two different types of SVGs. One is human readable, and and then you have the non-human readable variant. So let me keep going. And like I said, there's three ways to use an SVG. You can use inline, embedded it with a CSS background on like a div element, but then it like repeats, so you have like the same things that if you're using like a background image. You can select an object fit. You can do it. You can use it a couple different ways with how you normally traditionally use CSS. You can use it as an image source, which is very common as well, and that can scale from any resolution from really small to really big. So I'm trying to remember why I did this. Okay, so to give you the example of SVGs and like the machine generated variant, if you were to draw the smiley face and really like animate it from the frowny face all the way to the neutral, all the way to the smiley variant, right? And this is actually that we see at like an airport or like a bathroom. It's like, how was your experience today? Was it good? Was it awful? Was it amazing? And then you click that button. Have you seen that before? I just drew like a little like demo here, which I don't remember where it's at right now. But with this demo that I'm showing you right now is, how would you describe this animation or this shape right here using like actual hand-coded SVG logic? And it gets really complicated because, like I said earlier, you can define simple shapes like this, but if you're defining like a moving curve, it gets more complicated, and that's where a lot of these programs do the work for you. But I want to explain how that actually works. So like I said, you have the hand code variants where you're just like defining, if you're drawing the smiley face, you're going to define like the circle, like the circle right here. This is the smiley circle. This is like the eyes right here, and then all of this right here. This is if I exported this entire thing from like a actual like graphics program. It'll give you like this weird code at the very bottom where it has like these D values, right? And I want to explain what those are. Do you guys follow so far? So like, this is just a way to like actually make this smiley face actually encoded with just pure SVGs. and define that little smiley face. That's the machine SVG, like the non-human readable part. And it works by, you have to define it actually, what it does behind the scenes is it defines Bezier points. And I'll show you how that works. So this is a really good demo on CodePen that kind of illustrates how everything works behind the scenes. So if you click on a point, control click, there is, let me just go on CodePen. This is so much easier if I'm on CodePen. So let me clear this off real quick. Deletes. What is this reset path? Okay, I reset the entire thing. This app right here, what it does is it shows you the actual dpath, the actual machine generated code at the very bottom right, which I kind of want to blow this up so you can see it. Okay, so I drew just a line, right? I've got a start point right here, and then an end point right here, and it defines the actual like gobbledygook essentially that you're seeing on like the thing that I copied as an SVG earlier. So what it is it defines like a starting point value, an ending point value, and then it defines like the length of the item itself. Can you guys read this by chance? Is it too hard to read? Okay, I just want to make sure you guys can read it. I don't know how to blow this up, make it bigger. I could probably edit this file and actually just like make this file bigger. Or
so is that technically a path?
Yeah, that's at the path. Let me just, I kind of want to just do like a font size like 30px or something. Does this actually work? I'm sure this works. Okay, there you go. I just, this is the beauty of CodePen. You can modify someone else's file. So let me go here and reset that thing. Actually, sorry. Maybe you guys said you could read it. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you see this entire example, reset path. So have that dot. I create another dot. Right, and then let's draw that smiley face, which you snap it. All right, I'm having a brain fart moment. I don't remember how to. Oh, sorry. You set another point. Sorry, you set another point, and then you drag this point, and you tell what type of point it is, which in this case it's a C curve. And this, oh, sorry. Gosh, I don't even know. Okay. This is my retarded smiley face, guys. So this is a smiley face with like a little like drooly mark here, right? So what it is you have that starting point right here, the M value, that's like the start point right there, and that's this point in space and where it's located, and then it shows you the curvature associated with it, and then this line part is that very ending portion right there. So I just wanted to illustrate like why you see all this like weird crazy number schema in the background when you're like exporting your SVG files, when you're actually working with Illustrator or you're working with Sketch or you're working with whatever. That is all related to a set of points that are mathematically related, and it's exporting that file off, and that's what it's doing behind the scenes. So I just want you to be aware of like why things are happening this way. So if you were to actually modify this from scratch, it's going to take forever. You want to use a program to do it for you. There's also a couple of different other point types. So Q, the other one was like that. Like you have two Bezier curves. This one's like a center Bezier curve. So Q lets you just have a center point rather than two separate individual points that you can use, right? But yeah, you can kind of see what gets modified over right here.
So you have more control with a C curve?
Yeah, you have more control over the C curve. I think on my slides, I actually have the list of all of the different types actually. So you have the cubic Bezier curve, which is this part to this part, right? And then you have the S curve, which is just another type of curve that you can use. But the Q is like just one Bezier point as opposed to two. So you can make the same shape using one point as opposed to two, depending on like how you want to modify it. But this one gives you more flexibility in that you can adjust it and make an S out of it, or instead of just making just a U. And there's a couple other points that are used, but I didn't really want to get into those. These are the most common ones right here. These three. Now I want to talk more about animation on using JavaScript with SVGs. So when I was talking about earlier, you have that essentially gobbledygook of SVG stuff, because they're all it's all inline HTML. Like this is the body tag right here, and this is all inline. You can select and use CSS or JavaScript to modify these at will. And I don't know how to do this from scratch using JavaScript to modify this, but you can use libraries. And usually you'll use a library because it handles a lot of the math for you. So I want you to be aware of the different types of SVG animations that are available. You can use, where is it? Yeah, so you can use motion paths where you have like an actual shape, and then you have an item moving along that curve. You can have a morphed shape. So if you're making like a really cool like website and having like animations and like this little small shape growing out to this whole entire screen, you would use morphing paths with SVG animations. If you want to take a hand-drawn image and then like scan it on your copier and then like have Illustrator like vector trace it over and then throw it on the web afterward, you can use something called a line drawing animation. Yeah, what's up?
So you're not technically modifying each of those path gobbledygook numbers personally. You don't know what those paths actually are on the screen. You're actually just passing into JavaScript to animate along the set path that's already there. You're not actually identifying each point in that file.
Yeah, it's actually, I'm not sure entirely how the library works. I'm not an expert on this part. That's why the disclaimer at the beginning. But so you're taking that image, that inline SVG, and then you're putting the library on top, and you're actually, you can see it right here actually. This is the code example. It just goes through each of those machine encoded lines, and it'll just figure out where to run the animation. If that makes sense. So it literally just looks through and starts at the very beginning of the path, and then it looks through the very end point and sees like exactly what part should be animated, if that makes sense.
So I could literally just get me an SVG, create one,
and just
apply
throw
this JavaScript library and pick whatever animation I want to be applied to my SVG.
Pretty much, yeah. Because
so
if you ever go to like CodePen, who here uses CodePen? You guys use CodePen? Look up something like just look up CodePen drawing, and you could probably find so many interesting examples of that actual animation. So I haven't looked this up ahead of time. I think there's one called a tiger drawing, which is pretty cool. Actually, just kidding. Animated SVG. Let's see what comes up. So you can put loading icons if you wanted to. You can put, gosh, I don't know where that example is at. I had like a really good example earlier, but I don't know where I put it. But you can also animate something like this. And this is only possible with SVGs. And I literally just pulled this just randomly just now. I don't have any other examples for that.
How much CPU is that? Like how efficient is
So in terms of with animations, there are there's one CSS property that's considered performant on the web, and that is a transform. So if you use transform origin, transform rotate, transform anything, that is considered a performant CSS property. There are other properties that are not considered as performant, which I don't remember offhand. But essentially, what your browser is doing is re-rendering the scene every time it changes. You can do this with Canvas as well, which I could talk about later after this talk, which is sort of like similar in some senses, but not necessarily. SVGs are always essentially objects, right? This is an object as well.
But this particular example, this isn't just dropping on a JavaScript library pre-built that thing. So you have to actually
you have to actually do that yourself. You have to actually do this yourself. Like I said, I just literally pulled this up. I just looking for an example to explain the point that, but just going on, But just the point that I'm trying to make is it's very powerful and you can do a lot of different things. In this case of the line drawing, it just sees like where the starting point is at, and then it just animates the rest of it. I don't know exactly how this works. I just know that because it's inline SVG, you can modify it with JavaScript and CSS, and therefore you can put this library on top of it. That's basically what I'm trying to say.
Very cool.
All right, and
Are you going to go into more detail about how the smiley face was made?
oh yeah. I think I actually had the code.
I mean, I would assume it's maybe some kind of keyframes that you changed the key.
I actually have the code right here. I had written it previously, but let me see if this will run. Sorry, I just remembered I didn't have the code like lying around somewhere, but actually wait, I don't know if that would actually run. I can't remember where I put it. It's been like a couple of months I've done this talk, and I don't remember where I put that code. But I had it right here. I want to explain like what it actually does. So bear with me because I can't really show it because I don't know if this will actually run correctly if I put it on that actual file. But what you have is you have an on-change handler, which basically says like, if you put that slider and you modify it, you're gonna change this like a scalar essentially, and that modifies the amount of smiling or frowning he's doing. And when you run that file, or when you run that command, you run a different function called scale smile. And scale smile looks at the attributes associated with that SVG path, and it you essentially rewrite that encoded file to a different encoded that encoded parameter to a different encoded parameter, if that makes sense. You're doing math on those parameters and putting out a new parameter. Does that make sense? Like what I was showing earlier, when you're like drawing those little vector dots and then like moving around, you could see those numbers changing down there. What you're doing is you're actually using you're using the set attributes. So you're overwriting those attributes. You're taking the original attributes and then you're overwriting it.
And the actual math that's going on is in the on-change function down there?
Yeah, the on-change is what starts the initial call, and then the scale smile is what gets called afterward, and that does like some of the math behind it. The actual math itself is this thing called write smile points. And you could see like there's that little M thing right there, what I was showing you earlier, that's like the starting point. The C is like the curvature, and you're essentially like running this function and then this function as well. This is the actual logic of actually modifying the values. So it's using a factor and it's like modifying the Y value, because the X values are still here and here, right? They're not moving, but like the smile is like going from like this and then like here and then like, upside down, right? So it's just modifying the Y value only. And the C is I believe the C is the one that's like a single Bezier point, and then it's like you have the Bezier point, you're pointing up, it's like he's like frowning, and then you point down, he's like smiling. Yeah, so this is why we don't really use Vanilla.js to modify it, because you can see like that example seemed really simple, but like it was a lot of work. So, and this is just vanilla JS. So what I recommend, every time you like have to do animation SVGs, just throw a library at it. It's so much easier. So, but yeah, you'd see like there's some math behind it though. And yeah, like I said, it's literally just a HTML. What do you call those? The scroll, the HTML input scroll. I forgot what they're called. Yeah, but you get the point though. All right. Oh, sorry. So there's 3 ways to animate an SVG. So like I said, there's 3 ways to put an SVG on the page. You have like the inline SVGs, you have like the image that you're referencing, and then you have like the embedded CSS background, right? But there's 3 ways also to animate an SVG. That's only if it's inline. Doesn't like the inline with all the gobbledygook in the middle of the body tag, right? So who recognizes that logo? Do you guys recognize this logo?
Firefox?
No, it's not Firefox.
GitLab?
GitLab. Yeah. So if you ever go to gitlab.com and you like hover over the logo, it'll like, it's a Tanuki. Different parts of the logo will animate. And this is just a basic CSS property where you take like the Tanuki nose, in this case it's like this right here, the centerpiece. I don't need that. And then if you hover over it, you change the fill and the transition. So this is just straight up CSS transition properties, right? Because they're all HTML elements when they're inline. Another way to do it is keyframes, which you could do that traditionally with any CS or any HTML element to begin with, like I said. If you want to grow it, you want to shrink it afterward, you can keyframe it, which essentially says like, here's your starting animation, here's your ending animation. I'm running at 50%. So like it goes from 0, then it hits the 50% mark and it scales it, and then it goes back to 100% and then back to 0. And I give it a duration of 5 seconds. So like for every 5 seconds, like grow up and grow down, essentially. That's all it means. Then you also have the smiley face example where you use, your start. What you do is you actually pick your starting state and then you pick your ending state and then you use a library. I don't think I covered that part, but that's if you're using like anime.js. That's how you tell it to like, if you're showing like the morphing thing right here, what you would have to do is, wait, where is that morphing file?
So you're actually supplying 2 SVGs?
Yeah. So if you go to morphing, you're providing 2 SVGs. So you have a starting point. Wait. Where is it? Okay, so these values don't change, and then these are the 2 values that alternate. So between these 2 values are the actual line itself. The other values are actually just the background. But yeah, you essentially pick a starting point and ending point when you're doing any sort of morphing like that.
But that line draw, for example, that wouldn't require a second SVG. It's just drawing it from the start.
Yeah, that one you just set a starting point. You don't have to have that one. You don't have to actually have like an ending transition and a starting transition, because it's going from nothing to something, right? Yep. This one is going from like state A to state B.
Yep.
Or actually, sorry. Oh, sorry. I got that wrong. These values are all the different types of. These are all the different shapes.
That can be made.
Yeah.
Okay.
See, like there's like five shapes that's making, and there's like 5 different values. That's what it is. All right.
Some points, though.
But yeah, you can check out that library. It's really cool. There's also another type of animation called Smile, but I'm kind of going to ignore it because it's deprecated. So don't worry about it. Okay, so if you're like me and you suck at animation, you suck at drawing things, and you want like a tool like After Effects to do all the work for you. After Effects is used in the special effects industry for like the Michael Bay explosions and what you see in the movies, right? You can take that program and actually run a plugin called Lottie, which is created by Airbnb. And there's also a plugin called Body Moving through After Effects to generate an actual animated SVG. So here are some examples of what it looks like with After Effects and Lottie. And to illustrate like that point across, this is all just generated using After Effects. And this is all in CodePen, right? So you can see there's not much CSS. There is literally no HTML, and everything is JavaScript. And
So
it's just
After Effects generates all of those.
yes.
HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
Yeah, so I can go to the file and you can actually see like in an isolated container what it looks like. So literally everything you see here is what is being rendered on the screen, with the exception the fact that you're also importing a JavaScript file. So in case you're not familiar with CodePen, you can import like different libraries and whatnot. In this case, there's no CSS files anywhere found on this file on this actual program. But if you go to JavaScript, there is a bodymoving.js file, and that is what is that's the library itself. But what's actually rendering everything is this JSON blob. That's from that library. So that library is doing the animations, and the JSON blob is stating what everything should be doing in the scene. So if you were to actually go to this and copy this over, and I don't know why can't I just look at this? I guess I'll have to save it. It is just a lot of it's a lot of gibberish. You can see it's just a huge amount of gibberish. It's all minified, but it is essentially a minified JSON that is then read by the library that is used for animating that in the web. This JSON file itself was created on After Effects using that plugin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So if you're not, particularly artistic about animating, you want to use like a GUI tool or something to do all the work for you, you can just use After Effects with that plugin. And
So if you were to plug that After Effects animation into a web browser, the
yeah.
user goes to your site and tries to download an SVG. It's not going to be an actual SVG.
Nope, no, it's not. It is a JavaScript file that has like a create element and saying like create this element SVG behind the scenes. So it is SVG rendered by JavaScript.
So it'll actually be rendered as an SVG tag in the browser, in the element inspector.
Yeah, it'll actually be an SVG tag in the browser.
Cool.
I don't have an actual example. Actually, there is an actual example. I don't know if they changed this though. There is a site called Curse Gaming. If you guys play video games, I don't know if you guys play video games. Probably not. I'm pretty sure they still. Oh, they don't have it anymore. They had like this really cool like SVG like banner at the very front, which they got rid of. Just kidding. I was gonna show you that example. I showed it last time, and like essentially what it is like there's like this little gear icon that's moving behind the scenes, and if you inspect it, actually if I inspect this right here, maybe this will work. Oh, there you go. This works. See all this? You see earlier that there is that HTML on the left side. All this is rendered by, this is all JavaScript created SVG, and it's then processing all that metadata information and doing all the animations. I don't know exactly how this person did it. They might have used something like Lottie or After Effects. Actually, if I inspect this, actually this is Lottie. This is actually, I believe this is actually Lottie. So if you go to settings, you go to JavaScript. Oh, they're referencing some CodePen files. I don't know what's in those files, but you can go and check.
No, I don't want to jump ahead. You might have it later in your presentation.
Yeah.
But I notice whenever I look at SVG files trying to demystify them online, people are always animating utilizing CSS transform matrices. What is that?
Transform matrices?
Matrix, yeah. Matrices.
CSS transform matrix. I'm trying to remember what that.
Element inspector right there.
Oh, I've actually haven't really delved too far deep into SVG matrices. I've seen this before. I just never used it.
Okay, so there's other options you don't have to utilize. Matrix.
Yeah. Matrix. I don't believe. Whenever I'm in doubt, I just go to CodePen because there's always some hardcore person that always puts something together when it comes to whatever firmware A plus firmware B and or
Hold on, let me interrupt you here.
but I'm curious now. You made me curious. Yeah, you could use SVGs. In this case, this guy is using an SVG right here, and it's got the different paths, and this is that guy Luke was talking about that we showed earlier. And yeah, he is using a transform matrix, which let's just, for purposes, just delete this. Whenever you're in doubt, just see what happens. Okay, so you could see that it's actually doing the animation. So, it is a transform property. So it is, instead of doing something like, it is
Changing the values at that point.
actually, you're right. It is actually doing some 3D math with transform matrix. I actually never personally used this, so I have no idea how this works. This is actually all new to me.
We're in the same boat.
But that's good to know, though. But but just to hit the point, though. Wait. Okay. So whenever you're working with, whenever you're doing any sort of animation, one thing I want you to take away from this is you should always use transform. Transform is performant on the web. It's used to do pretty much all sorts of crazy cool animations like this rotate functionality, which again, this is the first time I'm seeing this, and I already made this happen. So yeah, just go on someone's code pen, just modify it and see what happens. But
What would you use as opposed to transform?
as opposed to transform, you can also use transitions.
Oh, yeah.
So you could say, well, back to that original example. I actually have those slides here. You would use a keyframe instead.
Okay.
Actually, was that? No, that was a keyframe behind the scenes. You could use a hover effect instead, which honestly is limited in some aspects. Or you could use JavaScript. So like JavaScript, keyframe, or a CSS hover states.
Okay.
So let me keep going on. I do want to point out, this is just another example of what you can do. Same thing, there's a JS file, and it's referencing that JSON blob, which I don't know why does it say JSON. And then that is pulling in that library called bodymoving.js, which is handling all the rendering of what that JSON blob looks like to what's on the screen.
What library?
It is called, if you look up after, it's called bodymoving. So if you go to that file right here and you change view, go to settings, go to JavaScript, it is called, in this case it's called Lottie. This one's with Lottie.
Oh, okay.
Lottie is created by Airbnb. Yeah, feel free to check it out.
So in your best practices, professional experience, how do you code? Do you hand code? Do you use After Effects? Do you hit a mixture of both?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm not a designer though. Well, I was a designer formerly, but most of the time I'm actually just writing just pretty much boring enterprise apps. So I don't actually do this on a day-to-day basis. I know. But if you wanted something cool like this, this is very hard to hand code because you don't really know how do you define all these different points in space, right? Like, do you define the person as like an SVG object? Do you define this as an SVG object? Then you have to think about how you're gonna rotate it. Something like this is very hard to do by hand. If you're making that smiley face, that's potentially possible, but you could see that it took like 30 lines, like 100 lines of code, right? I would always use a library whenever I get the option. It just saves you a lot of effort. I just want to show you what's possible and what's out there. There's also another one called SVG Gator. So this one's a little different. You use this tool online where you design the SVG and then you can export it off afterward. And what it does is it exports this SVG file, and you can see it right here. This is all inside that body element. And it does look like all gobbledygook essentially. But what it has is a bunch of CSS inline styles associated with that SVG file. It's all inline. And what you could do is if you're signing up and you hit subscribe, it'll animate one time and show you that one-stop shop animation essentially. If you were to run it again, it doesn't work. So that's one of its limitations. This is a tool online that you can actually play around with.
I'm assuming you utilize some JavaScript to refire that. Or?
This one actually, believe it or not, does not use any JavaScript. It is just straight up CSS animations. That's why it only runs one time.
Gotcha.
So it's like you click on it and it like
Animation stuff.
adds that. I believe it like when you run it, there's like a checkbox hack somewhere, and you click it and it just runs once and that's it.
Which is appropriate for submitted form, I think.
Yeah, it's perfect for a one-time use, but sometimes you want to run something multiple times. So this one has no JavaScript whatsoever. So back to the example right here, just to illustrate the different points. If you're using different tools on the web, for animating like a website, right, these are all the options available to you. You can, well, with SVGs at least, you can use a native SVG, right, where you kind of draw things by hands, and then you export it off Illustrator, and then you take like the bird, for instance, and then animate them with CSS. You could do it that way. If you want to just record a GIF and play it off constantly, that's also an option too. I don't know if you guys have known this either, but GIFs actually have a metadata associated with it, in which you could say, run this GIF one time. Yeah, it's not commonly known information though, but because I didn't even know about that until I came across the website and like it ran a GIF one time. I'm like, how's it doing that? Actually, if I go back on this page and refresh it, you'll see it right now. You see it's running one time, and that's it. It just ran one time. It ran one time. Actually, if I click on this file, which I have to go back to the edit functionality, and I download it, there's like a piece of data that says like run once.
So what is SVG Gator? Is that just a web service you can utilize and create a one-time?
Yeah, so SVG Gator, I want to show you what it actually is. It is a animate and export SVG tool. So what you do is you draw out your what's it called? Your vector, yeah. You can kind of see it right here. It's kind of hard. What you do is you draw out your actual thing. If you're using like Photoshop, Illustrator, it's like an online version of Photoshop and Illustrator. Okay. And then you got this tool at the bottom, which basically, if you're familiar with videography work, where you're like setting like, hey, at this point in time, I want to cut this frame in and cut this frame here. It's giving you like a tool set that lets you animate your different files. And that's something you can do. There's actually another tool out there, I forgot what it's called, that is similar to SVG Gator. But yeah, what it does is it exports off a CSS embedded, or sorry, a SVG with inline CSS. Gotcha. That's why it runs one time. Gotcha. Yeah, so just like something to keep in mind, if you're working on a site that has to be performant, and every like kilobyte size file matters. If you're running After Effects and Lottie right here, you have to have a specific Lottie file for every animation. So if you make like one animation, it's got like a file blob associated with it. You make another animation, it's got another file blob, and every time you do that, it takes about 200 kilobytes space, which if you have like 1 million users hitting your site at once, that's a lot of data. So if you fall back to native SVGs, this is always the most performant way. You can always use GIFs as well. GIFs can be really big or really small, and SVG Gator is kind of like in the middle in terms of size, but it only runs once. So if you guys are familiar with Sarah Drasner, she's like a CodePen IO wizard. She makes lots of cool stuff. This is one of the things that you can do with SVGs. You can animate different frames, right? And this is an actual CodePen file that you can look up. And you can actually run different filters on top of this entire object that distorts like the feel and look of the actual globe. So like it distorts briefly and then it explodes. This is just all using straight SVGs. I just want to show you what's possible with this type of application. If you're more into like data visualization, so if you're into data visualization, you might use something like D3.js. You guys might have already heard of this this library. D3 is just running SVGs behind the scenes. Sometimes Canvas, but it's primarily running SVGs. So any of these examples here, if you click on this example, just a random example, and you were to inspect it, you could see all the SVG paths. Right, all these right here. So D3 is running SVGs behind the scenes. That's what's creating all the graphics. So just something to keep in mind. If you ever work with that platform, that's all it's really doing. It's working with all of that gobbledygook and doing it all for you. You're just typing in some high-level commands, and it's running those transforms for you. And
any actual animations in that one?
That one, I don't believe so.
But they are creating SVGs, yeah.
You're creating SVGs. With D3, you could animate it as well. I'm not an expert on this. There was a talk last week on it. Actually,
Is this open source?
yeah, D3 is all open source. D3 is used commonly in data analytics, but if you inspect it, you can see there's circles here, right? Different circles. You got different paths, right? You see all the metadata associated with it. So yeah. In case you're into the data visualization world, this is all it's doing behind the scenes. There's a lot of math involved, but that's what it's doing. If you guys use MIT Scratch, has anyone used MIT Scratch before? It's a little kiddie programming language in which you can like program your own little like writing a train gecko, which this is an actual video game of sorts that you can work with. They have like this GUI program. I didn't even know it was going to pop up. I'm just pulling things at random. So, they have this like visual programming tool, right? You can snap together like different coding logic, right? And you can program visually. And how this visual programmer works behind the scenes, these actual icons, they're all SVGs. They're all path elements. Yeah. So SVG is really powerful. You can do a lot of different things with it.
You can build an interactive web experience through SVGs.
Yeah, you can build a whole video game out of it as well. I actually have a really cool example. My friend was actually making a SVG, you write your own custom language, your own like custom like syntax, and then it reads that file, and then it like creates like an actual like drawing from it. I'll show you that in a bit. I'll show that afterward. I don't have it on the slides. So one common thing that you'll do when you're working with any sort of SVG icons is you'll probably download SVGs online. A really good resource out there is called Flat Icon. And Flat Icon has all these great graphics and all these great images that you can just copy from. And credit to the author. So in case you're looking for like a phone icon or mailing icon or like an error icon, those are all potential opportunities. Have you guys ever used Font Awesome?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Font Awesome used to be a typography font in the background, but now it's running almost entirely in SVGs. So yeah, just to give you some perspective on like where it's currently used. Yeah.
And the difference between Flat Icon and Font Awesome is that
Flat Icon is actual
completely SVG.
Font Awesome isn't entirely SVG. Font Awesome 5 is a lot of it is in SVG format now. Font Awesome 4 is like the previous version that uses an actual font library instead. Flat Icon is just a place where you can download vectors, which are essentially free SVGs. So if you type in like phone, for instance, and I go to phone, and then I click on this icon, I can download the SVG. I don't know if you guys can read that. You can download that SVG. And then you just credit it back to the author. Which
at that point you could animate that, do whatever you want.
You can animate it, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
So this is a really good place to get icons. If you're using Font Awesome, which is a really common use case, if you go to, I just want to type in like paper plane. I don't know, just a random icon. Sorry, not this. If you inspect this page right here, these, well, they're not SVGs. There are actual SVG versions of Font Awesome though.
Yeah, I think it is SVG though.
Is it SVGs?
You have to look in.
Maybe it's a background image, but I remember reading about it, and they are moving mostly to SVGs. I guess you have to take my word for it though. I thought I could just pop it open and then show it, but I guess not. I mean, it worked for 90% of the cases I've done. I just popped it open. All right. So some alternatives. So SVGs aren't really the final cut solution for everything, right? There's lots of other solutions you could use. One really common solution, alternative to SVGs, if you're working on like you're trying to make a performance site, right? And you're trying to make it as small as possible. Like you don't want to have kilobytes of data in the background getting downloaded by all the people accessing your site. And you have like, let's say like you have like 30 icons. Like you have like Facebook icon, you have like a LinkedIn icon, you've got a Twitter icon, you've got like 30 other variants of it, right? And it's all on your site, either in the footer, the sidebar, or the header, right? You can treat all of those, you could you could import like 30 SVGs if you wanted to. And like each SVG is like maybe like 3 or 4 kilobytes, right? But what you can do instead is something called a CSS sprite. And if you inspect Amazon.com, they use it heavily. When you know Amazon's using it, other people fall suit. But essentially, if you were to go on Amazon right now and you were to inspect this, for instance, and then you'll see like a CSS like background image reference, and you download that file, it'll come up as this. And what Amazon does is they take all the images and they pack it into one image. So, what's up?
Atlasing.
What is it?
It's like an atlas texture for game engine.
It's like a if you ever done like any game development, which you have, it's like a sprite map. So you have like frame 1, this is the guy standing straight. Like frame 2, the guy standing this way. Frame 3, the guy standing that way. You know what I'm talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're a game developer. You were a game developer. It's the same concept. You have a bunch of images packed into one image, so the whole file size is smaller. And what you do is you actually, there's a CSS property that like references the exact location of where each image is at. And I can show you that in a bit if you want. So it's more performant instead of having a bunch of icons. That's something you should consider. You might get asked that on an interview question. I've gotten asked that before. So this is always good to know. This is especially common on e-commerce sites. You'll see CSS sprites on e-commerce because all the images and sprites and whatever are so predictable. Like there's always going to be a certain number of icons used.
And all the variations of the, say, the hover states are also in that same image.
Yeah.
And they load it once.
So you don't have to load one image, and you have to load it one image one time, and then it gets cached by the customer's computer.
Much faster.
It's much faster.
And updates too are simpler for your graphic artist.
What is it?
Graphic artist is going to submit version control one image.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to version control these images because then it's like, because I had to use one before and like I had to like, hey, that Amazon icon's too big, so I have to like throw out the entire Amazon image and then I have to like regenerate the whole sprite, and sometimes like, oh man, I made this a little smaller, now everything shifted up by 1 pixel. And then I have to go modify all the locations for everything else. So I could show you what it looks like. There are tools to automate this process. One is called Sprite Cow. What you do is, I'm glad they have an example because I don't want to upload images. So what you do is you highlight a bunch of images that you want to use, and then you just, I haven't used this program in a while. Okay. Pick background. Okay, well, anyways, I don't know. That's gonna get confusing. So basically, what happens is you will I just want to explain it verbally what will actually happen. You click that tool and you go to like spritecal.com or some other variant and you upload your images. You just drag all your images on there and it'll put all the images in that file like this. And it'll also generate the CSS that you need to grab this file or this file or this file. It'll just say like at position X here, position Y here, that's that image. And it's all referencing the same image.
So you can zip up all your site images, all your content, upload that into one Sprite Cal file.
You
go
could-
to that site and pull out all of this background position CSS, which will generate for you.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
all automated.
Yeah, so you can do that. You want to make sure that what you're using or what you're actually generating the sprite that you're generating should not change. So if it should be like company logos, Facebook icons, Twitter icons. You don't want to put like scissors and whatever like watering vase. You know, I don't even know what that is. That's Connect 4. You don't want to put Connect 4 on there and then like that product change, it's no longer hip or hot, and then you have to go modify all your CSS all over again. That takes too long. So just use it for very, very common applications like a shopping cart, a person's head, next mark, simple things. And I can show it afterward as well.
And reusable things.
Yeah, and reusable things because you can use it anywhere. Again, you can use fonts and emojis as well, which I didn't really cover. Emojis, depending on like what operating system you use, actually changes what the icons look like. So if you're using an app, or if you're using a MacBook, right, and you put like a gun emoji, it looks like a squirt gun. On the Windows computer, it looks like an actual gun. So those are some considerations you have to think of when you're using emojis. But if you're using something like Font Awesome, these are standardized. These are all SVGs that get created behind the scenes, or at least most of the new ones. Yeah, are there any questions?
Are you using sprites for links?
What is it?
Links?
Links?
Like hover states?
Oh, hover states?
Yeah.
Or stay away from sprites for...
Oh, if you're doing like sprites and you're trying to like hover over it and then like the sprite is doing something, yeah, don't use
the Amazon logo, but you hover over it and...
Yeah, don't use a sprite for that.
Okay.
Sprites are limited in that it's considered a background image, and background images are limited in terms of functionality. Like the background CSS image property, like you'll say background-image URL.
Sprite is considered background image.
Let me show like an actual sprite. Let me just go to Amazon. How about that? It's faster.
Okay.
But you'd be limited to the background CSS transforms, basically.
Yeah.
CSS properties.
Oh, they changed this to, if I'm not mistaken, they actually changed everything. It's no longer, no, just kidding. It's oh, right here. I'll show you. There is a background URL, and if you click this, it hides this icon. You can see that, right?
Every other icon as well.
Oh, other icon? Where?
This is on Chrome.
Oh, it hides every other icon. Oh, because I'm loading
Yeah.
the entire background image, and because I'm removing it, everything is disappearing.
Because it's the one source.
But if I go to this nav icon, and you go to the element style, which is right here, it says like here's the background position, right? If I were to change this from 340 to like, shoot. How do I modify? Oh, so I'll do like -10 px, -330 px. You could see like the icon kind of shifted over a little bit. If you do 341 px, or sorry, 345. It's like going upward now. 350 px. You could see like the whole thing is like shifting upward. So if Amazon uses sprites, there's a good reason for it. All right, it's performant.
So
So
it's like two-parter. Do you have your PowerPoint slide available anywhere online? Is it
Yeah.
And two, what resources do you recommend to get into
SVGs. Okay, so this is the image, by the way. I just pulled it up under CDN. I recommend the person that's probably the most I guess expert on this topic is probably Sarah Drasner. So if you go to her website, she's a really well-known like CodePen artist. want to think of it that way. She makes really interesting things like that. And she has a really good tutorial on, I believe it's on Front End Masters, and she also has a book on it too. It's Front End Masters.
Follow her stuff.
Yeah, just follow her stuff. You'll just have your mind blown on what things are possible. So let me go to like her actual. Yeah, so she works in that fly. There is a course called SVG Essential Animation. Which one? Wait. Oh, this is an actual SVG? Is it?
I'm joking.
I think he's joking.
No. Traced and Illustrator.
Gotcha.
Yeah, man, you got me. I thought you were actually. It really might be an SVG.
But that would be real good.
You joke, but actually no, it's a background image. When it says SVG, it'll actually like say like it says PNG base 64. That means it's a PNG image, but that could very well have been a background SVG. So you joke, but that could have been an actual thing. Yeah, you can check out her sites.
And she would help out with animation as well.
Yeah.
Particular.
Yeah, I would check out that course. I've tried it out. It's a really good course for understanding how SVGs work. This is kind of like some of the material that I researched to kind of compile this whole thing together. I went through her entire course, and it gave me like a really good understanding of like what SVG is actually capable of. Another thing you could do is just go on like CodePen and just go to her actual thing.
Just tear apart her work. Break it.
Yeah.
So you understand.
There's lots of cool things. Like this is the explosion animation. In case you're wondering, this is all SVGs behind the scenes.
Oh, that's not good.
So you know how she makes this is she makes it on Illustrator and then exports that to here, and she like fine tunes it, and that's how she creates all these like cool things.
So about exporting out of Illustrator
Or Figma or any other tool.
or any other tool. From a practical point of view, is if we just have to supply SVGs.
Mm-hmm.
We just make them in Illustrator and export as
Yeah.
SVG.
Yeah, like in that Figma example,
I mean, if your
if your work.
recipient doesn't want all that code out of Figma,
Mhm. Oh yeah, I gotcha. I got what you're saying.
they don't want to be supplied it that way.
They don't want you can send the actual file itself. Like you could just download. What you could do is you can actually in this case right here, this is an actual file. So I could just show it in my folders, and I can actually drag this over and send it to whoever. Does that make sense?
Where are you dragging? You're dragging it into what?
You can send it's just an actual file.
Yeah.
Like an email or into your web browser.
Yeah.
It'll show up as an image. But if you open it with a text editor, you'll actually see the code.
But he was dragging it over into Figma itself, putting it back.
You could drag it into Figma.
Yeah, you can drag images into.
I exported it off and I just dragged it back in. Some reason it looks a little bigger though, but it gets dragged back in as an image though, because it saw that SVG and it's like I want to make it an image instead. It didn't drag it as like an actual SVG where you can actually look at like the different. Actually no, it did drag it as an actual SVG. Sorry, just kidding.
Interesting. The properties changed.
You could still like hide different things right here. Yeah, you can hide the borders. See that? On the right side, I'm just hiding different things. On the right side. Yeah, that's pretty much it for the talk. I just wanted to show you what SVG was capable of and like the things you should know about it in terms of like what it does behind the scenes. So if you're ever working, what's up?
Any browser problems that you have to? Like in WordPress, you used to have to add a plugin to make SVGs work.
Let me check. So there's a site called caniuse.com,
Yeah.
and it tells you the support. It tells you what things support SVG currently. And unless you're using IE 6 or 8, which I don't think anyone is unless they're using like Windows XP. You could use it anywhere. I will say though, if you're doing a React Native app, which is like a mobile cross-platform application, you can't use SVGs, or you can, but it's complicated. That's just one thing I found. One issue I ran across at least.
Could you review, you're not in a hot seat yet. Could you review all the JavaScript libraries that you recommend? So we saw animate.js,
Yeah.
body moving one.
Oh yeah, good question. Actually, I threw everything actually on the slides right afterward. So Sarah Dressner's slide, she goes over more details on like what you can do with animating SVGs. Code Drops is a great site for looking at front end topics, and it's got some great examples of what you can do with SVGs as well. CSS Tricks goes over more of the mechanics behind the scenes. This is a great video that I recommend on YouTube. I believe that was made by Sarah Dressner. These are just all the things I use to learn myself on like what SVGs are capable of. In terms of some common libraries, anime.js is a really good one. They have great documentation. That was one of the ones I showed earlier. D3 is if you're using like data visualization in particular. There's also something called snap and svg.js if you want like a small library essentially to modify things on like a low level. Like you don't want so many things included, like batteries included. You just want the bare minimal amount of stuff in the library. You can use something like that. If you're using a plugin called GSAP, which is like the most popular animation library out there, and it has like the most robustness to it. It's called GreenSock Animation Platform. They have a bunch of different tools within that platform that you can use. It's a commercial grade application though, so you have to pay for it. But they have great things for doing animations, which you don't have to like figure out the math behind like animate this like really fast starting off and then slow it down afterward. You can run a program to do it for you. It's got Draw SVG, which is like that thing I showed earlier with like Animate.js, where you can like draw your thing that you drew out by Illustrator and like put it on the web and like have it animate in real time. Morph SVGs if you want to transform those shapes across. And the tooling is just like any tool that you're familiar with. After Effects for like the animations, you can use Adobe Illustrator, Figma. There's also something called Hero Patterns, which if you're trying to go for like a background, like a specific background on your website, and you want something like just really simple and you want like a subtle pattern in the background, you can grab like embedded SVGs. So it gives you this entire code that you just copy from, and that's an actual SVG itself. And you just paste that wherever you want in your CSS.
Perfectly titled background.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you want something cool and fancy, you could just click this, and I believe you could apply it to this site, but I don't know how to do that. Anyways, yeah. And what other things?
You had drawing by hand.
What's up?
Is that on that list? Drawing by hand.
Drawing by hand
So
is
you scan it in. And
you draw it by hand on like literally on a piece of paper, and then you can run it through a vector tracing program,
okay.
which is usually associated with Illustrator, and then that'll actually see where your lines are drawn, and it'll actually put that on the screen when you actually upload it to your Illustrator program itself.
So what you're saying is if I wanted to fire up Illustrator, Google how to do this, draw something by hand, feed it into Illustrator, and Illustrator will generate the vectors for me from my drawing.
I don't know how accurate it is per se, but I've seen it before. It can generate the vectors for you. That's how a lot of cartoonists, when they draw things by hand and they want to animate it afterward on an actual platform,
Gotcha.
they take that and actually take that hand-drawn file and actually put it in Illustrator, run it first, and then fine-tune it afterward.
Gotcha. But it's not perfectly one-to-one, you have to do some fine-tuning.
It's not perfect one-to-one. I haven't tried it recently, but I just know it's out there,
Cool.
in case you're curious. It's a way to bring your paper art to digital style, essentially.
You can vectorize any bitmap in Illustrator. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
You can do it. There's a bunch of settings you can set to how granular you want it, because all those pixels you transfer everything come into a huge file. Yeah.
Yep. And there's some other examples out there which I didn't really want to cover. There was that curse.com that I was trying to show earlier, but they changed their logo. If you ever go to a website called 16 Personalities, they use static logos for their background images. There's a app called Nuclino, like a note-taking app, and it shows like different like nodes out. I could show you later, but it shows like different pieces of information. They're all connected by lines that kind of move in real time. GitLab's logo, the little tanuki, when you highlight over, that's also an SVG. MIT Scratch, just a bunch of other things. In case you're curious, you want to look up. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, great.